The courtroom was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Not the normal kind of quiet either. This was the kind of silence that feels like it's pressing down on your shoulders, like the air itself is waiting for someone to crack. My dad sat 3 rows behind me, hands folded in his lap, jaw clenched like he was bracing for a punch. My mom was beside him, stiff and pale, eyes fixed forward. My older sister, Lauren, sat at the defense table. She stared straight ahead like I didn't exist. And then the judge leaned forward and asked my father one simple question. Just one. Not about loyalty. Not about forgiveness. Not about how hard it is when families fight. It was about money. About responsibility. About whether he had ever offered to fix what his pride and joy had broken. The color drained from his face. And in that moment, in that brutal silence, I realized something that felt terrifying and freeing at the same time. The truth didn't need me to defend it anymore. My name is Megan Brooks. I'm 29 years old, and 3 weeks ago I sat in a county courtroom in Northern Virginia wearing civilian clothes that felt like a costume, watching my own parents testify against me. Not against the person who stole my identity. Not against the person who opened credit cards in my name. Against me. If you told me a year ago that my own father would look a judge in the eye and call me vindictive for reporting a crime, I would have laughed right in your face. I would have said you don't know my family. I would have said my dad believed in hard work, accountability, and doing the right thing. I would have said he had flaws, sure, but he wasn't the kind of man who defended a felony just because it happened under his roof. I was wrong. The bailiff called the case number and everyone stood. The judge entered wearing her robe, moving carefully like she'd been doing this too long and it had stopped being dramatic a long time ago. She looked ordinary. No anger. No theatrics. Just tired eyes and a stack of files. My life reduced to paper clipped together. I didn't turn around when my parents walked in. I didn't need to. I could feel my mother's disappointment like pressure at the back of my neck. I could feel my dad's presence like a storm cloud. I could feel the way the room shifted, like people could sense the tension even if they didn't know the story. My dad didn't come sit next to me. He didn't even look at me. He walked straight past my row, went behind my sister, put a hand on her shoulder, and left it there. That was the moment it became real. Lauren was the defendant. Charged with identity theft and credit card fraud. 7 credit cards. $59,000. All in my name. All traced back to my parents' address. I was the victim. And somehow I was also the villain. Before I tell you what the judge asked my dad, before I tell you how one question made his entire story collapse, I need to take you back to the beginning. Because this didn't start in a courtroom. It started with a credit alert. I was standing in a hallway waiting for my shift to start, half listening to 2 coworkers arguing about weekend plans, when my phone buzzed. Credit alert. Significant change detected. I almost ignored it. I didn't have debt. I paid everything on time. I tracked my money the same way I tracked my responsibilities. Methodical. Precise. No room for surprises. It was a habit I'd built over years, because I learned early that if I wanted stability, I had to create it myself. But something made me tap the notification. The number that loaded didn't make sense. I stared at it like it was written in another language. 3 months earlier my score was 760. Now it was barely above 400. You don't drop that hard by accident. That kind of fall means something is burning down. My hand started shaking as I pulled up the full report. 1 card. Then another. Then another. Names I recognized immediately. Capital One. Chase. Discover. Cards I had never opened. Balances maxed out. Missed payments. Late fees stacked on top of late fees. Total debt, $59,214. I sat down on the cold tile floor because my knees stopped working. I called the first bank listed. My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. "There has to be a mistake," I said. "I didn't open this account." The woman on the line paused, the way people do when they're about to say something that's going to change your life. "Ma'am, these accounts were opened using your social security number." My stomach dropped. I asked for the billing address. She read it out loud. "My parents' house. The same place I grew up. The same zip code I still had memorized. The same front porch where my dad used to sit in the evenings like he owned the whole world." I asked her to repeat it. She did. I hung up and pulled up another statement. Then another. Same pattern. Charges at department stores. Online shopping sprees. A weekend hotel stay. A balance transfer fee dated on my birthday. And I couldn't stop thinking about Lauren's social media posts from the past year. The new phone. The designer bag. The little captions about starting fresh and choosing yourself. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might actually throw up. Lauren was 3 years older than me. She was always the one my parents worried about. The sensitive one. The emotional one. The one who struggled. Growing up, she needed help. I didn't. Or at least that's what everyone decided. "You're strong, Megan. You'll be fine." That was my dad's favorite line. So I learned not to ask for much. I paid my own way through community college. I moved out early. I built a life that didn't depend on anyone. And I gave my parents my information whenever they asked, because they were my parents. Because what kind of daughter assumes her own family would steal from her? Now I was sitting on the floor staring at a debt I didn't create, realizing my financial future was wrecked, and my whole life might be about to take a hit because someone else decided my name was convenient. I stood up slowly and walked outside, breathing hard like I'd just run a mile. The air felt too bright. Too normal. Like the world didn't understand something had just shifted. I called my dad. He answered on the second ring, warm like always. "Hey kiddo," he said. "What's going on?" I opened my mouth to speak and nothing came out. I was still trying to find the version of reality where this wasn't happening. "Dad," I finally said, "did Lauren open credit cards in my name?" There was a pause. Not confusion. Not surprise. Just silence. Then he exhaled slowly. "Megan," he said carefully, "why don't you come home this weekend and we'll talk about it?" That was when I knew. That was when the floor dropped out from under the life I thought I was protecting. I drove home that weekend with my jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt. The drive felt endless even though it was only a few hours. Highway miles and roadside gas stations and my thoughts looping the same question over and over. How long has this been happening? My parents' house looked the same as always. White porch railing my dad repainted every other summer. An American flag hanging by the door, frayed at the edges. For a second, I almost convinced myself I'd overreacted. That there was an explanation that didn't end with betrayal. Then I saw Lauren's car in the driveway. It was a newer model than the one she had last year. I parked behind her and sat there with the engine off, keys still in my hand. And I remembered being 10 years old, standing in that same driveway with a scraped knee bleeding through my jeans. My dad had glanced at me, then looked back at Lauren, who was crying because she missed a goal at soccer practice. "You're fine, Meg," he'd said. "Go wash up. Your sister needs me right now." I got out of the car. When I walked inside, Lauren was on the couch scrolling on her phone. She looked up, smiled too fast, then flipped the phone face down. My mom stood in the kitchen, hands busy with nothing. My dad leaned against the counter with his arms crossed, already guarded. No one hugged me. No one said "I'm glad you're here." It felt like I walked into a room where they'd been rehearsing. I didn't sit down. That was answer enough. My dad stepped forward. Your sister's been struggling. So you stole my life, I said, staring at Lauren. That was the solution. I didn't steal anything, she shot back, suddenly defensive. I borrowed it. I was going to pay it back once I got on my feet. You opened 7 credit cards in my name, I said. That's not borrowing. You have a steady paycheck, she said, voice rising. You're fine. There it was. The sentence that followed me my whole life. You're fine. I laughed, short and sharp, because if I didn't laugh I might have screamed. I'm not fine, I said. My credit is destroyed. This could mess up everything I've worked for. My dad lifted a hand. That's dramatic. I stared at him. Dramatic. This is a felony. He shook his head like I was being ridiculous. This is family. We don't call the police on family. Something inside me cracked. So what's the plan? I asked. I just pay for it. My mom finally spoke, voice small. We thought maybe you could help her get back on track slowly over time. Over time, I repeated. This will follow me for years. Lauren sniffed, like she was the one being attacked. I said I was sorry. I looked at her. Really looked. No shame. No fear. Just annoyance that I found out. I'll make payments when I can, she said. But I can't sign anything legal. What if something happens? What if something happens, I echoed. Something already happened. My dad's voice hardened. Enough. You're not ruining your sister's life over money. My hands were shaking. You're asking me to ruin mine instead. He stared at me like he genuinely didn't understand the problem. You're strong, Megan. You always land on your feet. And that was it. That sentence explained everything. Lauren wasn't the one expected to carry consequences. I was. I tried one last time. If she signs a repayment agreement, I won't file anything. Lauren shook her head immediately. No. That's not fair. My dad nodded. She's right. We're not turning this into a legal mess. Something went quiet inside me. The part that still hoped. Then I'll handle it myself, I said. My mom's eyes widened. What does that mean? It means I'm filing a police report. Lauren burst into tears like she'd been waiting for that moment. My mom rushed to her side. My dad's face went red. You wouldn't, he said. I would, I replied. And I am. He pointed toward the door. If you do this, don't come back here. I walked out without another word. And on the drive back, I realized the hardest part wasn't the debt. It was the fact that my family had just made it clear who they thought mattered more. I filed the report the following Monday. I didn't do it in a rush. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it the same way I did everything else in my life. Calm. Direct. Like someone handling a problem that had to be handled, even if it hurt. The officer who took my statement didn't blink when I said the amount. 59,000, I repeated, hearing how unreal it sounded out loud. He nodded slowly, typed a few notes, and asked for the basics. Dates. Addresses. Any proof I had. I handed over everything. My credit report. Screenshots. Bank letters. A printout of the billing addresses tied to the accounts. All of them connected to my parents' home. When I walked out of the station, the sun felt too bright again. Like the world was trying to act normal while my entire life was being ripped open. That night my dad left me a voicemail. You crossed a line, he said, voice tight with anger. You embarrassed this family. I listened to it twice, not because I needed to, but because I couldn't believe it. Embarrassed. That was his biggest concern. Not the crime. Not the damage. Not the fact that his younger daughter had been used like a spare bank account. Just embarrassment. For the next couple weeks, my life turned into paperwork and panic. The bank started calling constantly. Morning. Afternoon. Late at night. Numbers I didn't recognize lighting up my phone. Voicemails stacking up, each one more urgent than the last. Some of the customer service reps sounded sympathetic when I explained the situation. Others sounded annoyed, like I was trying to get away with something. According to our records, ma'am, these accounts were opened with your consent. No, I said, over and over. They weren't. You'll need to prove that. Prove it. I faxed police reports. I emailed fraud affidavits. I mailed copies of my ID. I sent proof of where I was during the account openings, showing I wasn't even in the same state for some of them. Every step felt like begging to be believed about my own life. The worst part was the waiting. Not knowing what would happen next. Not knowing how far the damage went. Not knowing how long it would take to repair something I didn't break. One afternoon, sitting in my car during lunch, I made the mistake of looking at Lauren's social media again. I told myself I was checking for proof. Really, I think I was checking to see if she felt anything. If there was guilt hiding somewhere between the selfies and the captions. There was a post from 8 months earlier. Lauren smiling in a department store mirror with shopping bags at her feet. The caption said Fresh Start Energy. The timestamp matched one of the charges on my report. $2,300. Same store. Same day. I shut my phone off and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was grieving. Not the money. Not the credit score. I was grieving the idea of my family. The belief that if something happened, if I needed them, they would protect me. That belief was gone. The detective assigned to my case, Detective Collins, called me 2 weeks before the hearing. We finished the preliminary investigation, she said. The evidence is strong. How strong? I asked. Clear pattern, she replied. Multiple accounts. Charges tied to your parents' address. IP addresses. Communication records. It's going to court. My stomach dropped. My parents are furious, I admitted. That doesn't change the facts, she said calmly. Are you prepared for them to show up? I hesitated. I don't know. They often do, Detective Collins said. Sometimes not for the reason you hope. The night before the hearing, my dad finally called. Not to apologize. Not to ask if I was okay. He went straight to the point like this was a business disagreement. Lauren's attorney says this could ruin her future, he said. I closed my eyes. She ruined mine. She made a mistake, he insisted. You're taking this too far. Too far would have been pretending this didn't happen, I said. Too far would have been letting her keep doing it. There was a pause. If you loved your sister, you'd drop it. If you loved me, I said quietly, you wouldn't ask me to. He hung up. The morning of the hearing, I wore a navy blazer and a white blouse. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, trying to look like someone who belonged in a courtroom. Trying to look like someone who wasn't terrified. I didn't want to show up as a symbol. I wanted to show up as a person. When I arrived, Lauren was already there with her attorney. She looked smaller than I remembered. Hair pulled back. No makeup. Eyes down. She didn't look at me once. Then my parents walked in. They didn't acknowledge me. They went straight to her. My mom took Lauren's hand like she was holding onto something fragile. My dad leaned in and whispered something that made Lauren nod. They sat behind her like a wall. And I felt something in my chest tighten. Not surprise. Just confirmation. This was the side they chose. I sat there listening to my own father rewrite my life in real time. And the judge let him talk. She didn't interrupt. She didn't sigh. She didn't roll her eyes. She just listened. Pen moving slowly across a yellow legal pad. Eyes dropping to the documents. Then lifting again to study the people in her courtroom. My mom stepped down from the witness stand, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, carefully avoiding my gaze. My dad followed, jaw tight, expression proud like he'd defended something sacred. Lauren sat very still at the defense table. Her attorney leaned close and whispered something to her. She nodded. The picture of fragility. The daughter worth saving. I felt hollow. Not angry. Not shocked. Just emptied out. For a brief moment, I wondered if I should have stayed quiet. If maybe the debt, the damage, the humiliation of court was worse than living with the lie. That was the voice I'd been trained to listen to my whole life. Don't rock the boat. Don't make it harder. You can handle it. Then I looked at the stack of papers in front of the judge. My credit report. The affidavits. The transaction logs. All the evidence I hadn't imagined. The judge adjusted her glasses and finally spoke. Mr. and Mrs. Brooks, she said evenly. Please remain standing. My parents froze. My dad reached for my mom's hand and squeezed it like they were bracing together. I've listened to your testimony, the judge continued. You believe your daughter Lauren made a mistake. You believe this matter should have been handled privately. And you believe your other daughter's actions are motivated by resentment rather than harm. My mom nodded quickly. Yes, Your Honor. That's exactly it. I didn't ask a question yet, the judge said calmly. Silence dropped like a weight. She looked down at the file again. According to the evidence, 7 credit cards were opened using Megan Brooks's social security number. The total debt is approximately $59,000. The accounts were linked to your residence. Is that correct? My dad cleared his throat. That's what the paperwork says. The judge looked up. And you are aware that identity theft and credit card fraud are felonies? Yes, Your Honor, my dad said. She paused just long enough for the room to hold its breath. Then she said, I have one question. I felt my heart slam against my ribs. She turned her gaze fully to my father. At any point before or after this was discovered, did you offer to repay, co-sign, or otherwise assume responsibility for the $59,000 your daughter Lauren incurred in Megan Brooks's name? My father opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The judge waited. 5 seconds. 10. My mom's breathing turned shallow. My dad stared at the floor. I didn't ask if you could afford it, the judge said gently. I asked if you offered. My father swallowed hard. No, he said. The word landed like a dull thud. Did you propose a payment plan? The judge asked. No. Did you contact any of the creditors on behalf of Megan Brooks? No. Did you offer any form of restitution to the victim of this crime? My father's shoulders sagged. No, Your Honor. The judge nodded once, like she'd expected that answer all along. You've asked this court to view Megan Brooks's report as vindictive, she said. Yet there is no evidence that you took any steps to mitigate the harm she suffered. Instead, you appear to have expected her to absorb the consequences on her own. My mom started crying. Not controlled tears. Deep shaky sobs that sounded like something breaking. My dad didn't look at her. The judge turned to Lauren. Ms. Brooks, the evidence against you is substantial. Based on what I've reviewed, this matter will proceed to trial. Lauren's attorney started to speak, but the judge raised a hand. Bail will remain in place. No contact with the victim. Passport surrendered. Mandatory check-ins. Then the judge looked back at my parents. This court does not require one child to sacrifice their future to preserve the comfort of another. Accountability is not cruelty. It is justice. The gavel came down. And it was like the whole room exhaled. As the bailiff called the next case, Lauren finally turned around. Her eyes met mine. And what I saw in them wasn't regret. It was anger. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was sorry I refused to carry it for her. I stood up on legs that felt strangely steady. My parents didn't follow me out. They stayed behind Lauren, closing ranks one last time. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different. Lighter. Not because the damage was undone. But because the truth had been spoken out loud by someone who mattered. And for the first time since that credit alert buzzed on my phone, I felt something close to solid ground beneath my feet. The weeks after that hearing moved slower than anything I'd ever lived through. There were no dramatic moments. No big conversations. No sudden apologies. Just waiting. The kind of waiting that makes your thoughts circle like vultures. Quiet enough that every fear sounds louder. Long enough that even small tasks feel heavy. From the outside, my life probably looked normal. I woke up early. I went to work. I answered emails. I smiled when I needed to. I did my job like nothing was happening. But inside, I felt like I was holding my breath every day, waiting for the next hit. The debt didn't magically disappear just because the judge called it what it was. Banks still called. Collectors still left messages. Some of the accounts were frozen, but others stayed open long enough to keep damaging my credit. And every time I logged in to check, I felt that same sick drop in my stomach. Like my name didn't belong to me anymore. One afternoon, I got pulled into a meeting with someone above me. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't a punishment. It was that careful, professional tone people use when they're trying to be fair but also protecting the organization. They slid a printed copy of my credit report across the desk. They tapped the total debt with a pen. This could become a problem if it isn't resolved, they said. I swallowed. I'm working on it. They nodded once. You've always had a solid record. Don't let personal issues become professional ones. Personal issues. That's what my life had been reduced to. A personal issue. A footnote. A potential risk. I left that meeting feeling colder than I had walking into court. Not because they were wrong. But because I realized how much damage one person could do with your name, and how quickly the world could decide it was your responsibility to clean it up. At night, sleep didn't come easily. I'd lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the same scenes. Lauren flipping her phone face down. My mom looking away when I asked if she knew. My dad saying you're strong like it was a compliment instead of a sentence. Sometimes I'd wake up at 2 in the morning and immediately start doing math in my head. How long would it take to pay this off if I had to? How much interest would build? What would happen if I missed one payment? It was like my brain couldn't stop scanning for danger. Like I was still in that courtroom, waiting for another blow. Lauren didn't reach out. She wasn't allowed to contact me after the judge's order, but even if she had been, I knew she wouldn't have. In her version of the story, I was the enemy. The sister who broke the rule. Protect the family no matter what. My parents stayed silent too. No calls. No texts. Not even a neutral message like "hope you're okay." The silence felt deliberate, like punishment. Like I was being taught a lesson. One night after a long day, I sat alone in my apartment and stared at my phone, willing it to light up. Part of me wanted my dad to call and say he was wrong. That he finally saw it. That he chose comfort over truth and it cost him something. Another part of me already knew better. Then the call came. Detective Collins. Her voice was steady and professional. Lauren accepted a plea agreement, she said. I closed my eyes. What does that mean? She's pleading not satisfaction. Just the knowledge that consequences existed somewhere outside my body now. After the call ended, I sat there in silence. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Like I'd won. Instead I felt tired. Bone deep tired. Like I'd been carrying a weight for months and someone finally admitted it was real. 3 days later, my dad called. I stared at his name on the screen. My thumb hovered. I almost didn't answer. But I did. His voice sounded older than I remembered. "Megan," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" A pause. About everything. We met at a coffee shop halfway between my apartment and my parents' neighborhood. Neutral ground. No family photos. No memories baked into the walls. Just the smell of espresso and people typing on laptops like their lives were normal. My dad looked smaller sitting across from me. His hands shook slightly as he lifted his cup. He cleared his throat. "I didn't handle this right," he said. Finally. I waited. "I thought I was protecting your sister," he continued. "I didn't see that I was hurting you." I studied his face. The lines around his eyes. The stubborn set of his mouth. The way he still wanted to be the good guy in his own story. "You saw," I said quietly. "You just decided it was acceptable." He flinched like I'd hit him. "I didn't think you'd break," he admitted. "I didn't," I said. I bent. "There's a difference." He nodded slowly, like he was hearing something he didn't want to understand. "I should have stood with you in that courtroom." "Yes," I said. "You should have." Silence settled between us. This wasn't a reunion. It wasn't healing. It was an inventory of damage. "I'm not asking you to choose me over Lauren," I said. "But I won't be sacrificed to keep the peace anymore." He looked down at the table. "Your mother isn't ready." I nodded. "I know. When she is, she can call me." He swallowed. "You're really serious about this?" I leaned back in my chair. "I've always been serious. You just didn't have to notice before." He didn't argue. We finished our coffee without warmth. No hugs. No promises. Just two people sitting in the consequences of years. When we walked out, the sun was low and the air felt cold against my face. My dad stood there for a second like he wanted to say more. Then he just nodded and walked to his car. 2 months later, the first restitution check arrived. $412. I stared at it like it was a joke. Not because it was small. Because it was proof. Proof that the story had shifted. Proof that the burden wasn't mine alone anymore. I deposited it and watched the number in my account change by an amount that barely registered. But my chest felt lighter anyway. That night, I slept all the way through until morning for the first time in months. The sentencing hearing was quieter than the first court date. No character witnesses this time. No speeches about family loyalty. No emotional pleas about how Lauren was really a good person who just got overwhelmed. The facts were already on the record. And facts don't need defending when they've finally been acknowledged. I sat alone on one of the hard wooden benches. Hands folded in my lap. Back straight out of habit. I'd taken the morning off and driven in early, parking a few blocks away so I could walk and clear my head. The air outside was sharp and cold. It burned my lungs in a way that felt grounding. Like I was still alive. Lauren sat at the defense table again. But she looked different. Not softer. Not fragile. Smaller, like someone who finally realized the world wasn't going to bend around her anymore. Her attorney spoke briefly. Lauren nodded when prompted. She didn't look at me. My parents arrived together. But they didn't sit behind her this time. They sat farther back. And there was a small, unmistakable gap between them. My mom stared at her hands. My dad kept his eyes on the judge. When the judge reviewed the plea agreement and pronounced the sentence, Lauren's shoulders slumped slightly. Probation. Community service. Mandatory counseling. Restitution. A felony conviction that would follow her everywhere. The gavel fell. And it was over. No dramatic outburst. No apology. Just the end of one chapter and the beginning of another that would take years to unwind. As people started filing out, my dad stood up slowly. He hesitated, then walked toward me. For a moment I wondered if he'd finally say something real, something honest, right there where the truth couldn't be rewritten later. He stopped a few feet away. "You got what you wanted," he said quietly. I looked at him. Really looked. The man who taught me how to ride a bike. How to throw a punch. How to stand my ground. Just not against him. "No," I said. "I got what was right." He didn't respond. He turned and walked away. And that was the last time I saw my mom in person. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Not normal. Just different. My credit score started creeping upward point by point. Fraudulent accounts were closed. Notes were added to my file explaining the circumstances. It would take time, but time was something I finally felt allowed to have. I started therapy about a month later. I'd avoided it for years, telling myself I didn't need it. That I was fine. But sitting across from someone and saying my family chose my sister over me felt heavier than I expected. Each session peeled back something I didn't realize I'd been carrying. I wasn't angry all the time anymore. Just sometimes. And when it came, I let it pass instead of swallowing it whole. Healing didn't show up like a big moment. It showed up quietly. In the way my shoulders started relaxing again. In the way I stopped checking my credit report 5 times a day. In the way I could finally sit in silence without bracing for impact. 6 months after sentencing, my life looked ordinary from the outside. I woke up early. I went to work. I trained. I paid my bills. I cooked simple dinners and cleaned my apartment on Sundays. If you didn't know the story, you'd never guess my family had shattered in a courtroom. The biggest difference was what I didn't do anymore. I didn't check my credit report every day. I didn't jump every time my phone buzzed. I didn't hold my breath waiting for the next disaster. I checked my credit once a month now. The number kept inching upward, slow and steady. Not fast enough to feel exciting, but steady enough to feel real. Proof that damage can be repaired when you stop pretending it isn't there. Lauren's restitution payments came in like clockwork. Small amounts. Never enough to feel satisfying. But enough to matter. Enough to remind me that accountability existed beyond words. I never cashed them with any sense of triumph. Every deposit came with a complicated mix of relief and grief. Relief that the burden had shifted. Grief for the sister I thought I had. The sister I believed would protect me the way I'd protected her. That sister never existed. The hardest part wasn't losing Lauren. It was losing the version of my father I built my life around. The one who taught me to stand up for myself. The one who told me to work hard and be honest. The one who acted like integrity was the most important thing in the world. I had to accept that his integrity had limits. And those limits showed up when it was time to protect me. My dad texted once, months after everything was over. Just one line. "Hope you're doing well." I stared at it for a long time. Then I put my phone down. Some bridges don't burn. They just fade into the distance until you can't see them anymore. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish him. But because I didn't know how to pretend we were okay. I didn't know how to give him a soft version of me anymore. The truth was, I was learning how to live without needing my parents' approval. That was new. That was hard. That was freeing. One evening, I was standing in my kitchen making dinner for one. I was visiting a friend nearby, and I stopped in to grab a few things. I was halfway down an aisle, looking at canned soup, when I heard my name. Megan. I turned and saw him standing there with a basket in his hand. He looked older. Thinner. Like someone who'd been carrying something heavy without knowing where to set it down. His eyes held that same uncertainty I'd seen in the coffee shop. Like he didn't know who I was anymore. Or maybe he didn't know who he was in my story. "Dad," I said. We stood there between shelves of soup and boxed pasta, surrounded by strangers who had no idea our history was collapsing quietly in aisle 7. He cleared his throat. "I didn't raise you to turn on your family," he said finally. The old instinct rose in me instantly. The urge to explain. To soften. To justify. To make him understand. That was my role for most of my life. The one who smoothed things over. The one who made everyone comfortable. But I didn't do it this time. I took a breath. "You raised me to tell the truth," I said. "I just stopped lying for everyone else." He didn't argue. He didn't apologize either. He nodded once, like he was filing that answer away somewhere he might visit later. Then he looked down at his basket. "I hope you're doing okay," he said quietly. I nodded. "I am." And that was it. He walked away. No hug. No closure. Just the truth sitting between us, finally too big to ignore. My mom never reached out. I stopped waiting for her to. At some point, hope turns into habit. And habits can be broken. What surprised me most wasn't the loss. It was the space that opened up after. The energy I used to spend managing other people's emotions was suddenly mine again. I used it to build something quieter. Something sturdier. I moved into an apartment closer to where I needed to be. Nothing fancy. Clean. Mine. I started treating my life like it mattered again. I stopped letting my mail pile up like I was afraid of it. I started cooking real meals instead of eating whatever was easy. I started taking care of my space, not because someone might judge me, but because it felt good to live in order. In therapy, I learned a phrase that stuck with me. Being the easy one isn't a compliment. It's a warning sign. I'd spent my whole life being the one who didn't need much. The one who didn't complain. The one who adjusted. The one who absorbed impact so other people didn't have to feel it. I thought that was strength. Now I know strength is saying no without apology. Strength is letting people sit with the consequences of their choices instead of cushioning every fall. Sometimes late at night, I still thought about what might have happened if I stayed quiet. If I'd paid the debt. If I'd let the story be rewritten to keep the peace. I could picture it too clearly. A version of me years down the line, tired and resentful, still cleaning up messes that weren't mine. Still being told you're fine while my life got smaller. Then I'd look around my apartment. At the calm. At the quiet. At the life that was slowly becoming my own. And I'd know I chose right. People love to say family is everything. What they really mean is family is supposed to be safe. When it isn't safe, when love comes with conditions, when loyalty requires self-destruction, something has already gone wrong. I didn't destroy my family. I stopped holding it together with my silence. And if you're listening to this and you're standing at that same crossroads, the one between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not cruel for choosing accountability. You are not heartless for refusing to be used. You are not wrong for protecting the life you worked hard to build. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop being the one who always bends. Because bending turns into breaking when no one ever stops leaning on you. So if you're in that moment right now, feeling guilty for drawing a line, feeling like you're the bad guy for finally saying enough, remember this. Boundaries don't make you selfish. They make you free. And freedom feels strange at first. It feels quiet. It feels lonely sometimes. But it also feels like breathing again.